And we're live. All right. Today I have Edwin Choi of the Jet Fuel Agency here with me. Thanks for coming on the show, Edwin.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, we were talking a little bit beforehand about your agency. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more just about what got you into the agency world in the first place. What made you choose to go that route?
Yeah, certainly. So I'll give a little bit of background to myself, right? So I have been involved in digital marketing since 2009. So doing this for a better part of 15 years now. And all throughout my teenage years, my college years, I've always loved, just selling stuff, right? I love the feeling of buying something for $1, selling it for three, right? So that translated to my professional career because I had a three-part career, right? First part, I was agency side as an employee. And I saw a lot of what can go right for clients and a lot of what can go wrong, right? So I had that reference experience. I then went in-house at an e-commerce company, led a best of breed marketing team. We scaled 5 to 30 million in 4 years in annual revenue per year, and I really got to touch like every channel marketing, and it was so exciting, right? It was like a game, like a video game, right? Then after I left that company, I sort of kind of marry the two, right? I was saying to myself, is there a way that I can replicate what happened at that company, right? Run things at that speed with that success and have that much fun with multiple companies in the agency model. And that's how Jet Fuel Agency was born, right? And it was really a personification of how I wanted to send my day, every day, right? Teaching, learning, testing, executing, like that's the stuff that gets me, awake in the morning and happy to get up. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, every agency has to start somewhere. There's always like the initial client that you get in the door. So I'd love to
hmm
learn a little bit more about like how did you go from the idea of the agency to getting your first client? Like what did that look like?
Certainly. Like there are two kind of reference points for me that really kicked off the agency. One was that I have always been fairly active on the freelance side, right? So in my off hours, at that agency, at pretty much all my roles, I always carved out a little bit of time to freelance, right? So in doing so, I have built up a little bit of a network of, clients or companies or individuals that they were happy with my work, right? So when
Mhm.
I started the agency, I had that, as a jumping off point, right? Where I was able to say, hey, I could work with you at a greater capacity, right? Or maybe I haven't worked with you in a couple of years, but this is what I'm doing, right? And then the second kind of big piece was I have been doing a lot of due diligence projects for venture capital firms, where venture capital firms would come to us and say, or come to me and say like, hey, we need to do due diligence on a project. We need to like have some advice on the digital marketing space for our portfolio companies, and a lot of those relationships manifested into clients. As soon as I founded Jet Fuel Agency, so I think those two things combined really gave us a solid jumping off point, so
Mhm.
then we didn't start from square one, so to speak.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of appealing to your network and prior people that you'd worked with. Was it just a matter of like, you decided to build the agency one day and you're like, I'm gonna kind of put together a bunch of emails and just kind of email blast until somebody says, yeah, I want to work with you.
I mean, there's certainly an element of that, right? Just saying, hey, here's what I'm up to, right? If you're interested or someone who's interested, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to sit down, have a chat, and provide some value, right? I
Yeah.
think that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is that when you have results, right? That that is almost like a channel in itself. So if you do well for companies and someone asks them, is there someone you could recommend? Is there a group you would recommend? Then you want your name to be top of mind, right?
Hmm.
So it kind of always boils down into the results and the work you do. And even to this day, that's our primary channel for getting clients.
Nice. Did you know exactly like what I guess range of offerings that you wanted to do from day one, or was it something that has evolved over time?
Uh, I would say it's a little bit of both, right? So I think I came in with a preconceived notion of what offerings we would offer, and it was certainly in the paid media space, right? I have a very long background. Media buying is something that I love to do. So that was our initial offering, and we wanted to offer many things connected to that as part of that offering. But obviously, as agency owners, the first thing that we figure out is that if you want to be profitable and efficient, you really need to pare that down, right? You need to focus
Hmm.
on being world class at a few services and then kind of let everything fall by the wayside. So we have spent maybe 3 to 4 years really sharpening that and getting dialed in on that. And now we are, very good at a few services, right? So, which would be paid social, paid search, email and SMS marketing or retention. So those three are still our bread and butter main pillars. And
Hmm.
that's what our team is focused on. That's what we're focused on for clients. That's what we're learning about each and every day. And then everything else we have other partners or other solutions for that.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Yeah, I tell people, what's your zone of genius? Like
Hmm.
there's seems like in any agency, there's always like the area where it's like, oh yeah, if we just did this, like we could do this one thing in our sleep and
Hmm.
get good results and have happy clients constantly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times maybe scope creep can kind of, make you add more and more services over time. But I think if
Hmm.
you can push against that and kind of really just stick to where you're doing your best work, that can serve you well in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, fast forwarding, it's fun to ask about the very first client, but I imagine that it's shifted a little bit. It's changed over time,
Hmm.
um, to how you got like your most recent client. So can you talk about um, how your biz dev approach has changed over the years?
Yeah. Yeah. So my biz dev approach is certainly, I think I would describe as surface agitation, right? Like you go to a pond, you take a stick, you stir things around, and you kind of see what floats up or like what swims around. And that's really my approach to biz dev, right? Is making sure that we're talking and meeting with interesting people that are really driven in their respective fields and then forming partnerships with those individuals, right? Or making
Mhm.
sure that we have like great kind of bi-directional value adds to each other, right? I would say that's mainly how we do and conduct our biz dev. On the on your other question, like how do we get our latest client? It is through referral, right? One of our current clients said we did great work to somebody else. They heard about it, they reached out, and they want to have a conversation, and then that's how we close that client. So, like I said, like I want to make sure, and I tell this to the team all the time, like the main way that each individual here can help me with biz dev and growing a company is doing great work on day in day out. Like the work will speak for itself, and then
Yeah,
everything kind of falls in line with that.
yeah. Do you think about that as like kind of your best way forward as far as getting your next client in the future is to just keep doing great work and letting the referrals come in, or are there any sorts of things that you are exploring or want to try to do in the future?
I'm hyper focused on that. Like I
Yeah,
think we can get to 150 clients only doing that, and that's the goal.
you mentioned 150 clients. Is that kind of like a magic number for you, or what like why 150 clients? Just out of curiosity.
I picked that number because someone else, another agency owner on another podcast, got to that number with only doing great work and only 100% referral. So if I know one agency could do it, then I want to challenge myself to be the second agency to do it.
Right on. Well, I think that segues pretty well into my next question, which is, you know, where do you want to go with your agency? You mentioned 150 clients.
Mhm.
Once you reach 150 clients, is there you know, uh, a lifestyle sort of, goal? Is there you just want to kind of keep on growing it, and don't really have a concrete end goal for it? What are your thoughts around that? Do you want it, to sell the agency?
Mm. I would say, and this is probably might be perceived as like dodging the question, but I would say that all of the things that could happen to an agency, whether it be a roll up, an acquisition, lifestyle, holding company, it still all kind of comes back to one answer, right? Which is building a business that provides a lot of value that's proven by metrics. So if your top line revenue is growing at a certain percent year in or year out, your margins are being maintained or hit goal year in year out, you retain your employees and you retain your clients, like those four metrics is what I'm like laser focused on, right? Because if you focus on that, then you have options. So obviously, if you're preparing for acquisition, many other things have to happen, right? You have to have a great growth story. You have to have, you know, a defensible, strengths and weaknesses of the agency, and we're still doing all of that, right? Not necessarily to, prepare to be acquired, but more so it's the right thing to do, right? As
Hmm.
a business owner, right? As a shepherd of the business. So, if you were to ask me and put a gun to my head, like what would be the 5 to 7 year plan, it would be to make the agency what pretty much one of the best places to work as an agency employee. It
Hmm.
would be to be one of the you know best kept secrets in our space for agency performance, and then it would be to have opportunities, right? And then I would love to, I talked to some other agency owners, and their agency is essentially a holding company, right?
Hmm.
Because what we do day in and day out is grow companies, right? So why not grow a company that you own, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, the number one asset of the agency is the people. So what can we do to maximize opportunities for our people? That might be one way, right? But again, I think we're really just focused on those four metrics, and as long as we can hit those targets year in year out, uh, we can hit it in any of these goals as we proceed along our path.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned those 4 metrics. Can you repeat those one more time and maybe kind of unpack those a little bit? I think,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
other people that are paying attention, they might be like, "Oh, okay, like maybe I need to, simplify things down to 4 main metrics that I need to focus on."
Certainly. So there's top line revenue growth, right? So are you able to set a target at the beginning of the year and by the end of the year hit the target, right?
Mhm.
Sounds simple, but not so simple to do in reality, right? And a lot of that requires, success in your business development, success in your pricing and making sure it's competitive, but also keeps up the times, success in your service portfolio and making sure that you have a balanced percentage of revenue per service. You know when's the right time to add a service, when's the right time to perhaps delete a service, right? So
Mhm.
that's the top line revenue piece. Then you have your margins, right? Your EBITDA, your margins, your NOI, right? So this is how efficiently are you running the agency? Is everyone appropriately resourced? Do you have some way to measure that, to optimize that? Do you have processes in place to take advantage of opportunities that come up with existing clients? Do you have ways to defend and chat about scope creep, right? And do you have a great revenue per head, and are you constantly measuring and talking about optimizing that and then moving that forward, whether that be through operations, processes, AI? Then you have your employee tenure, right? Your best people, are they sticking with you for a long time? Are you keeping them engaged and having open two-way conversations about their careers throughout the tenure here, right? And then you obviously you have client retention and client NPS, right, which are all tied together.
Mhm.
And that just goes back to doing good work and communicating about it.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, you said you early on that you had experience inside of an agency that you were working
Hmm.
in. Has a
Hmm.
lot of what you've decided to do with your own agency, kind of across those areas and probably even beyond that, come out of like kind of deciding what you want to do and what not to do, from working in that agency? Or I mean, did you bring, I guess, other, um, I don't know, opinions and preferences for how you wanted to do things from elsewhere?
Certainly a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, right? I
Yeah.
think what that agency did really well, that I still take, a little bit of inspiration from, is relationship management, right? They had a great client services team. They formed really sticky relationships with said clients, and there's an art and a science to that. I think the agency I was with, it was almost all art. I attempt to add some science behind that as well, right? So that's one piece that I certainly took back to this agency. And hey, I'm still learning to this day, right? So I'm not touting myself as some expert there, but we try to get 1% better at that every single day, right?
Yeah.
The things that I took away from that, where we don't repeat those things, is that making sure that the scope of services is not too broad. Because what
Mhm.
wound up happening, it, and look, like, I don't fault anyone for this, but what wound up happening was that you had a couple teams that brought in like 80% of the revenue. So they got all the attention, all the professional development. You had these kind of bolt-on services, and you might have just really lean teams running with no direction on those bolt-ons, right?
Mm.
But they're not
Yeah.
exactly happy, right? And because of their contribution to the overall share revenue, I could see as a business owner, they probably, didn't get a ton of, developmental opportunities or attention or whatever the case might be, right? So when I kind of built this agency, I really wanted to make sure, like, as much as I could, obviously being human, sometimes I am doing this and sometimes I'm not, but making sure each team has that appropriate level of like professional development opportunities, recognition, and kind of top to bottom, like every single team, even back office, is, they're getting that spotlight, they're getting those opportunities. So I would certainly say that is like a key piece of learning for me from that
Mhm.
experience. And then your other questions, like, do I take inspiration from other sources? Like, all the time, like whether it be my in-house experience, right? Like, what I love about my in-house experience was that it almost sometimes felt like college, where we were all in a class and just trying to learn stuff and figure it out together, like a group project,
Mhm.
right? And that culture and that energy is something I really like wanted to bottle up and live and breathe that at my organization, right? And again, like, we're making strides on that. It's not perfect, but I do wholeheartedly believe it's one of the best places for you to, level up and be inspired by your peers, in the
Yeah.
agency space.
Well, you mentioned a couple times professional development, and
Hmm.
I just thought that was interesting, because I feel like that's not always brought up by other agency people. But
Mm,
I've thought myself that you know if in an agency your people are your product. So
yeah.
if you're wanting to improve the service, the product, professional development is a really key part of that. So I'd love to for you to kind of just unpack your point of view around kind of professional development and its importance, and maybe any other thoughts you have around that.
It's I mean, it's a must have. You can't not have that, right? Because of two reasons, right? The first reason is that our clients look at us to be subject matter experts. And fortunately and unfortunately, our subject changes every 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like the algorithm changes, the rules change, what you can see, what you can't see change. So if you don't have that muscle to keep up with the pace, you're going to be left behind. And that's going to reflect on your work, and that's going to reflect on, the quality of what you produce, right? I think that's the first piece. The second piece of it is that it is such a key company pillar for us, in terms of us making sure that everyone has that self growth muscle, right? So we tell everyone, like, hey, we're definitely going to give you the fishing rod. We're going to tell you where to fish, but we do expect you to figure out the last piece on your own, right?
Hmm.
So professional development is like us setting people up and giving them that architecture in their brain to get successful at that, right? And the other piece of it too is that I believe wholeheartedly that this is a fundamental piece of employee retention, right? It is not the perks. It's not how cool your office looks. It is how are we contributing to to the development of your career. Like,
Yeah.
that is the core for making sure people are happy, because when people are growing, they're generally happy,
Hmm.
right? Like, generally speaking, if people don't think they're growing, they're generally unhappy, no matter like all the other variables.
Yeah. You want to feel like you're progressing, not just stagnating. Because it's like the cost of living goes up every year. Like all these other things go
Hmm.
up every year. And so it's like, well, I have to keep on improving my own skills every year to make sure that I'm kind of staying competitive with the flow of everything else. So, and I
Absolutely.
think agencies in particular, I think a lot of times people decide to work in an agency because there's kind of this idea of a more accelerated um, kind of opportunity to basically learn, by working with a bunch of clients doing the same thing and, kind of skilling up much more rapidly than you might if you were working in house at a brand or something.
Hmm.
So, yeah, no, I think that's super important. Well, Edwin, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your answers to all these questions. For people who want to learn more about jet fuel, for folks who just want to kind of follow you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our site, which is Jetfuel.Agency. Could connect with me on LinkedIn. If you type in just Edwin Choi, probably be one of the first five people, I hope. Uh, and our latest venture is called agencyaccountant.com. So this is our bookkeeping service for agencies, right? So
Mm,
30-second backstory to this is that we have built like a kick butt finance, like outsourced CFO type of team in house, and has helped us tremendously with monitoring, watching, and optimizing our margins. And we know the agency business in and out. So if you need help with that, that's the place to find us.
nice. Basically, you solved your own pain, and then you're just trying to help other people solve that same pain.
I think that pain is pretty common from what I heard. So
Yeah.
we're forced to start this business.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, look forward to seeing you around.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, David.
Thank you.